Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Extra Point Podcast. I am Andrew Goldberg, and as always, I'm joined by Adam Levin. And Adam, this week we've added another one of our fellow Fox Sports DCPers, or digital content programmers, so it doesn't sound a little dirty or immature, in Zachary Benau. Zach, how are you doing? Don't you feel privileged to join the show?
Feel honored to join the show. Can't wait to talk some football and get going with Week 10. But excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for joining us. It was Dan Schneider and Eddie Pascal, but Eddie moved on to a full-time gig with the Oakland Raiders, which is awesome for him. Dan had a lot of other commitments for football, which is awesome for him. He covers the NFC East still for us, for Fox Sports. I cover the AFC East for Fox Sports. Adam covers the NFC North, and Zach covers the AFC South. You can tweet at us at AGberg12 for me, at Blue Collar God for Adam, and at Zachary Benau for Zach. Pretty simple all around. Hey, look, last night, Week 10 got off to a great start. The Browns had their first meaningful game in what seemed like, I guess, forever, I guess we could say, as they beat the Cincinnati Bengals 24-3. Andy Dalton was terrible, had a QB rating of 2, had 3 interceptions, and I think he had 84 yards passing last night. Meanwhile, the Browns' rushing attack, despite the injury to Alex Mack, the Pro Bowl center, held up last night. Terrence West rushed for 94 yards and a touchdown. Isaiah Crowell, 41 yards and a touchdown. Ben Tate, 34 yards and a touchdown. And, I mean, Cincy looked terrible. Andy Dalton looked terrible. That contract now looks terrible. And the Cleveland Browns are tied for first. That is, of course, before the Steelers beat down the New York Jets this weekend. But for right now, everything's great in Cleveland, guys, isn't it?
Yeah, everything is pretty good in Cleveland. I mean, here they are at 6-3 in Week 10. Who would have thought that? They don't even need Manziel to even be doing that. He's been an afterthought, and they're on top of a division where everybody's above 500, including their last place team, the Ravens, who might even be the best team in the AFC North. So I think it's a pretty good surprise for them.
Yeah, I mean, life is good in Cleveland, which is something I never thought I'd say. Hoyer's getting the job done. He's being efficient. Yesterday, only threw for 198 yards, but 15 of 23, no mistakes, and another poor prime time performance by Dalton, which I honestly am just getting used to expecting. Playoffs, prime time, constantly coming up short.
Yeah, that seems to be the big theme with Andy Dalton. There's 3 certainties in life: death, taxes, and that Andy Dalton will fail in the limelight. I mean, last night he looked terrible, and you got to think now as the Bengals fall to 5-3-1, but they're still in it. They're still in the thick of things. They're remarkably 3rd in the AFC North in the standings, as Pittsburgh and Cleveland are both tied at 6-3. Presumably, Pittsburgh goes to 7-3. They take on the 1-8 Jets this weekend, and Baltimore is at 5-4. But we presume that they'll be 6-4 when they face Tennessee this weekend. But I mean, who would have pegged it at the beginning of the season that the AFC North might be either, I guess, what would you guys say, the most competitive division or the best division in terms of quality?
I don't know if I could go the best, just because I think they're all beating up on each other. But it's definitely the most competitive. And, if you would have told me Week 10 all 4 of these teams were going to be over 500, I would have thought you were crazy. But I would still say the NFC West is tough despite the Niners' flaws and whatnot. I know we'll get to that later. But AFC North is definitely looking to be the most competitive, as all 4 teams can come down the stretch and win this.
Yeah, I agree with what you said, Zach. I'm also not sure whether to say it's the best. I think there's other that have been good as well. But it's definitely surprising that every team is above 500, especially the Browns, who I still don't know about the Browns. You know, I still don't know how good they really are. You guys have said it. We all kind of know it as football fans and people who cover the sport. Like Andy Dalton, he's not a primetime guy. He looked terrible last night. Absolutely awful. I feel like he gave the defense some of their, three and out. Some of the three and outs caused by the defense were because Andy Dalton helped them out. So I don't know how good the Browns are, but still, they're above 500. They win the games they're supposed to. I think it might even come down ultimately. You tell me how you guys feel about this, but I think it might ultimately come down to perhaps the Ravens and the Steelers fighting it out, because I still think even though the Ravens are 5-4, statistically they're really good. Joe Flacco could be up and down, but that's a good defense. I think the Ravens and the Steelers might be the Ravens might get hot, and then the Steelers, I think, can continue what they're doing, especially offensively. Maybe.
Yeah, well, here's the schedule for Cleveland. I mean, Cleveland, say what you want, they might not have the greatest talent, but they may actually become one of those teams that you might not want to see in the playoffs if they do make it. I believe they're the 6th seed right now if the playoffs ended today. And the whole hoopla surrounding Josh Gordon and his drug suspension, they might get him back by I think after next week, they get him back. They also will get Jordan Cameron back. So now after having absolutely no offensive weapons, I mean, their leading offensive weapons last night were Miles Austin, who hasn't really been relevant since 2010 or 2009 with the Dallas Cowboys when he had that breakout year. Gary Barnidge, Travis Benjamin from Miami, like second or third year receiver, and a rookie receiver in Travis Gabriel. They really have no outside threats to throw to, but Brian Hoyer has done a great job of kind of like Alex Smith, I guess would be the best comparison right now, at least in my eyes, because he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He doesn't turn the ball over. He had no touchdowns, no interceptions last night, but 198 yards. And he let that defense, which, to be honest, under Mike Pettin has been very, very good this year. And Mike Pettin, believe it or not, guys, is probably up there with Bruce Arians, either probably the second if you ranked AFC Coaches of the Year. Or not AFC Coaches of the Year, just Coaches of the Year in general, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he's done a phenomenal job. It's unbelievable. And, like, you touched on it for a second, if you go through their schedule, they got some winnable games down the stretch here to claim the division. They got the Texans next week, who are facing their backup quarterback with Mallet. Falcons, who are loads of trouble. Bills, who are playing well, but are still the Bills, So they get the Bengals again. So there's no reason that they can't win this division and for sure somehow get into playoffs as a potential 6th seed or wild card.
No, yeah, I mean, look, they could potentially win the division. Pittsburgh might be inconsistent the way that offense has been looking, so it might be the Browns. You're right, but I mean, it's remarkable that the Browns are even in this position. It's like, and the Cavaliers with LeBron, it's like a city that's been miserable for so many years might now actually be good on the sports scene. But I don't know. I really think the Ravens are an undervalued team. I think they can make a run towards the end of the year. Let me ask you guys this: do you think that the Bengals? This is a different topic, but do you think that the Bengals maybe that this might have been the game that kind of starts like a slide for them, a slide downwards, because it was ugly last night with Dalton, and boy, if that didn't make that team lose confidence in him, I don't know what could.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're in big trouble. I think that game, loads of confidence problems coming up. Saints next week on the road, which, I mean, you can almost just chalk that down as a loss. So it's going to be big problems in Cincinnati, and the pressure is going to be on Dalton, especially with that contract and, already the way he's performing. And Bengals had Super Bowl aspirations this year, and now they're looking like, they're going to be missing out on the playoffs. So, yeah, I think this could be the start of a free fall. I completely agree with you, Adam.
Yeah, well, okay, let's look at that schedule because, like you said, next week is New Orleans, and they're away at New Orleans, and all New Orleans does is win at home, and they barely, if ever, win on the road. They go at Houston, which is a winnable game technically, but could be a loss if you think about it, depending on how Ryan Mallett looks after he was named starter in Houston. You go to at Tampa Bay, which, as Zachary knows, Tampa Bay sucks. But if they somehow they have an explosive offense, so if they somehow just explode out of nowhere and start winning, that team's pretty dangerous. Then you're versus Pittsburgh at home, at Cleveland, versus Denver, which is surely a loss on Monday Night Football, and then at Pittsburgh to end the season. And I don't know how much to attribute Cincy's slide with the fact that A.J. Green wasn't out, but he didn't look good last night. And honestly, I think if Cincinnati does not make the playoffs this year, I think Marvin Lewis is out as head coach. He surprisingly went from a guy who was kind of safe in the coaching ranks. This is his 12th year, by the way. Kind of safe in the coaching ranks, but possibly on the hot seat. Like, really on the hot seat going into next year if they don't make the playoffs, especially since they haven't won in the playoffs since making it 3 straight years.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, and he hasn't won a playoff game, and he's probably the third most tenured coach in the league or something like that, or maybe
behind Belichick and Coughlin.
Yeah. So, and no playoff victories to show for it. It's amazing, yeah, and that defense is usually pretty good, but this year they haven't been good at all. I think last year they were top 10 in scoring defense. This year they're 21st. The defense has completely regressed. I'm worried about that team. I really am, especially because I think that, look, we were talking about schedules down the stretch. I know I've been repping them a lot, but let's take a look at Baltimore. Home against Tennessee, at New Orleans, home against San Diego, at Miami, home against Jacksonville, at Houston, home against Cleveland. And this is a team that's 8th in the NFL in scoring offense. They're 5th in scoring defense. They have the 6th best point differential in the league. Pittsburgh also is a team that down the stretch could potentially make some noise in terms of winning that division because at the Jets this week, at Tennessee, home against the Saints, at the Bengals, at Atlanta, home against Kansas City, home against Cincinnati. You never know. You gave the Cleveland schedule. It's intriguing with Cleveland. We kind of all agree about Cincinnati maybe taking a step down, but I don't know. Like I still look at Baltimore and Pittsburgh and think, maybe they could do what they've done for so many years in this division, which is battle it out for 1 and 2, especially if the Ravens can get hot their next few games and not, even though they're 5 and 4 and they're a good team, still like in a division where guys have barely been winning, you gotta be better than 1 game above 500. I understand that, but if they were to get hot, I think them and Pittsburgh could make it interesting.
Yeah, and to your point as well, Baltimore and Pittsburgh, those franchises know how to win. They're just straight winners. I mean, just remember 2 years ago, Baltimore won the Super Bowl. So we're not too far off from that. They both got great coaches, in Coughlin and Harbaugh as well. So, it'd be tough. Baltimore, I never count against a Harbaugh team. I know Jim's having his problem with the Niners, but I'm never counting against any Harbaugh team just because they are so tough-minded and the way they play, they're always going to be tough, and it's just a team you don't want to face, and they know how to win. And while we went through Cleveland's schedule, it's still Cleveland, and that's what's giving me the hesitancy to pick them for the division because I just can't trust. I really can't trust any sport from Cleveland, and I certainly just can't trust the Browns. I can't believe we're talking about the Browns in Week 10 of this because that would have been the last thing I would have predicted.
Yeah, it's like the football apocalypse. The factory of sadness has become the factory of happiness down in Cleveland. And the last point I'd like to say is 2 things. One, the Bengals on defense and overall are pretty banged up. I know a lot of teams are banged up this time of year, but if you look through their injury report going into last night, you had Giovanni Bernard, who's an absolute stud, receiving the ball at the backfield and running the ball. He did not play last night. Vontaze Burfict, outstanding linebacker for them, he didn't play last night. Marquise Bernard, their first-round pick out of Michigan State, was limited in practice before. Leon Hall was hurt. Ray Maluga, another great linebacker, was hurt. And they also don't have, what's his name? Oh, no, those are the only two guys. And then they also don't have Terrence Newman and Andre Smith left the game yesterday. So that's a lot of big names for them on defense. And, I think that is really where they made their bread and butter. Last year, their defense was great, and their offense was just good enough in terms of giving the ball to Giovanni Bernard and finding A.J. Green, and Andy Dalton actually threw 33 touchdowns. In terms of Baltimore, look, I trust them more than Cleveland. I think you brought up a good point, Zach, is that Baltimore and Pittsburgh have histories of winning. But Baltimore, if we're going to go by the whole schedule, at New Orleans is really tough. Versus San Diego is still a tough game despite their 3-game slide. At Miami, that's a toss-up game depending on how Miami has played, but they've played really well the last 3 weeks, including a blowout win last week against San Diego. And then Jacksonville and Houston are very winnable games, and then end the season with Cleveland, which could or could not be for the division. So if you just go by schedule, I'd say Baltimore is the toughest out of all 4. And amazingly, they have a better win differential than Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Cincinnati does.
Oh.
Yet they're in last.
Yeah, that's Andrew. That's what I'm saying about Baltimore is statistically, by the advanced metrics, by the scoring differential. I mean, they're the best team in the division. I don't even know how they're 5-4 because their team stats are unbelievable. They're one of the best teams in the league. How are they 5-4? I don't know, but that's how weird the division's been.
A couple big games. Remember that Flacco game where they put up like 60 points or whatever it was,
Yeah.
Help some of those skewed stats. One last thing, I know we're going to move on from this Browns game from last night, but can we just touch on Jeremy Hill's quote that when he said they're not that good? What? You can think that in your head or whatever, but you just got beat badly, and I don't know what his stats are. He didn't do anything. Just to go out there and blatantly say that, and then the reporter gives him an out to be like, well, are you sure you meant that? He reemphasizes his point. It's like, yeah, I'm positive. He's like, they're not even close to that good. He's like, they didn't do anything special. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about that is, all right, this is going to be funny. It might turn off some of our viewers and whoever. Okay, I was a Division III athlete. When you face another team and you lose by, a couple points, you're like, all right, we didn't bring our A game today. We really sucked. If we just showed up today and we didn't make as many mistakes, we could have beaten those guys. They weren't that good. I'm not trying to take away anything from the Browns. And look, Andy Dalton looked terrible. He's not going to throw for 86 yards again. But, that is a dumb quote. You can't really come out and say, hey, look, we think we're better than them after getting blown out by 21 points and your offense musters up about, 170 total yards of offense. So, you do think it is ridiculous. So, all right, cool. Good segue. So, let's go through our I thought someone was going to come through and say something after that, but all right, that's fine. We're going to go through the divisions now, and because we're kind of versed in all the divisions, Zach with the AFC South, myself with the AFC East, and then Adam with the NFC North. We're going to look at each division, go through the top headline or stories of each team really quickly, and kind of give a preview also of each game, just what's going to happen. So let's start with you, Adam, in the NFC North. Obviously, there's the headliner Sunday night game of the Chicago Bears against Green Bay Packers. Jay Cutler always sucks against Green Bay, and Aaron Rodgers always does well against Chicago. Give us a little preview. Give us what's happening there in the NFC North.
Well, yeah, that's a good place to start. The NFC North, it's funny. The entire division had a bye last week in Week 9. Only the Vikings played. This week, the Vikings have a bye. The rest of the division comes back. Why that's important? The Vikings are going into their bye at 4-5, but that's enough for Week 9. They're on a bye. Chicago's 3-5. If they lose, they'll be 3-6, and they host Minnesota next week in what could really be a winner go home game, because if the Bears, who usually get dominated by the Packers, lose, 3-6, last place in the division. That's not good for a team that was projected to do bigger and better things for an offense that scared people. It's an offense that's been, solved for the most part when they've played rematch games. There's a lot of statistical evidence and talk in the media there about how when Mark Trestman offenses face a team in a rematch game, so some of the teams they played this year that they played last year, either through the placing schedule or whatever it is, or divisional games, will hold down the offense a second time. Jay Cutler's a turnover machine. The Packers really own him. He only has one win against them in 9 or 10 tries against the team. So he's been owned by them. The defense has been bad, and unless they really get motivated, and they never do well in Lambeau, even when Favre was there. So I think this is a win-or-go-home game for them, and I already think that they're going to lose. I think the Packers are going to win that one big. The Vikings, like I talked about, are on a bye. I think they're a team to watch for coming out of the stretch, so that's the last thing I'll say about them. Lions play a team, Andrew, in Miami. Miami, a team that, as you mentioned, they've been coming on the last 3 weeks with some impressive wins, and Miami is a team that looks really good defensively. I don't know about Ryan Daniel, but they look good defensively. On the other side, the Lions, another team that defensively has been surprisingly good. Top scoring defense, top total defense, top 5 in passing and rushing defense. I mean, this is a team that even despite injuries has been, shutting people down. And Matt Stafford hasn't even had most of his offense all year and has been mediocre, and they've still found a way to win. They don't make a lot of mistakes. He's getting weapons back with Calvin Johnson and Reggie Bush coming back healthy, and the tight ends coming back healthy. Tight end has been a position of a lot of mystery and injury, and it's going to be interesting against Miami. I think Miami and Detroit are two defenses that are a bit under the radar, and the winner of this game, especially if it's in a rout, is really going to impress me, whether it's Miami or Detroit.
I got a question for you, Adam, just because every time I'm watching Red Zone or Sunday Ticket, these Detroit games, like last year, they were my favorite team to watch. I know they've had no Megatron, but they've been so boring, and the game's been 13-10, and then, they end up winning these games, but do you think they can, hold on and stay in front of Detroit and win this division, or stay in front of, Green Bay and win this division? Because every time I watch them, I just don't see a playoff team.
I think that if they're able to get their offense going, then maybe they can. I don't necessarily think they're not a playoff team. Now, I don't know how far they can go if this offense keeps going the way it is. But if this defense, stops Miami and plays well against New England and things like that, then why not? I mean, they've already made the Saints and the Packers look bad, and those are really good offenses. I think this defense could get them into the playoffs. I like the way that they don't make a lot of mistakes. They kind of win it with running the game. Matt Stafford has never completed more passes to more receivers maybe in single games than I've ever seen before. I don't know officially stat-wise, but it seems that way. And he's on pace to have one of his lower interception years, maybe his lowest interception year ever. That's still in play. So they're finding different ways to win. Granted, you're right. They need to get a little more explosive, but getting weapons back could help. And I still think that this team has been a more sustainable 6-2 than they were last year, where it was all Stafford to Calvin Johnson, and that was it. I mean, this team has figured out ways to win through injury, and is a lot. They're not giving games away on stupid penalties. I actually think this team has been undervalued a little bit. Still, though, I know why people don't buy them. They are the Lions.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the Detroit Lions this year, it seemed like, in the years past, like for the last 3 years, they get off on this hot streak and then totally fall off at the end of the year because of, like you said, dumb penalties, blowing games at the end because they just weren't good enough, et cetera, et cetera. But this year, they're first in total defense in terms of yards. The Dolphins, who they're going to face, is third in terms of defense in total yards. So you're pitting the two best defenses in terms of that. Coaching change, I don't know if it's just the fact that they got Golden Tate to go along with Calvin Johnson and that their defense has been so much improved this year. But under Jim Caldwell, it just seems like they've kind of found that way of turning, like, not their season around, but turning their fortunes in late games around, which has been the key to their season. And I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is in your opinion.
I mean, in my opinion, it's the defense keeping them in the games and allowing that offense to do enough to win games. But I think it's also that they don't commit penalties so they can stay in games. The play calling's been more conservative, but it's been smarter. Matt Stafford's not, throwing the ball into triple coverage anymore. It's much more concise, precise offense. I really actually think that the coaching has a lot to do with this. I think Jim Caldwell's calmed the ship down. Nick Fairley's been playing awesome, and he came in as a guy who was benched in a preseason game because he was too fat, and he's been one of the biggest golden boys in the game. I mean, he's been amazing. Sue has been a non-distraction even with the contract hanging his head, and has been great. I mean, this guy has been this is a much more mature team. That's a credit to Jim Caldwell just calming the ship. And the coordinators, Joe Lombardi for the Lions, is making Stafford at least more efficient and more technically sound, even if his numbers are down. And on defense, Terrell Austin, it doesn't matter if guys go down. He just puts these guys into good schemes, and their secondary is kind of underrated. And I just think that the coaching has been a big part of the reason, to tell you the truth, and the defense just keeping them in games and allowing them to even come back.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I've also, I've been so impressed with Golden Tate. He's just stepped up and has been, a number one wide receiver for them. With Calvin Johnson coming back this week and, assuming he's healthy and everything, I mean, I personally think it's just going to help his numbers. Megatron's going to get double teamed and, open him up more. But I've been reading a lot of things saying, it could hurt him, that he's not going to get as many touches and not as many looks and, go back to being, not quite as productive. You have any thoughts on that?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, maybe, and Matt Stafford has had a kind of a penchant for doing that, but I'm not sure because, look, even in the games that Calvin was in, he was a little banged up, so his numbers weren't the best, and Golden Tate was looked at from week one. I mean, I know he didn't have the 2 touchdowns like Megatron does, but he was still being looked at down the stretch for third down conversions and third down pickups, and that team really utilizes guys like Joique Bell and Reggie Bush out of the backfield pretty well. So I don't necessarily think it's going to hurt Golden Tate. I think Golden Tate will still be able to fall in line. He's not the leading receiver for no reason. I mean, Stafford has kind of found him early and often since week one. So I really don't. But it depends. It all depends on Stafford's mentality.
Yeah, and he has 80 targets this year. Granted, a lot of that came once Calvin Johnson was hurt and didn't play the last 2 games. And obviously that also leads to the reason why he leads the team in receiving with 800 yards and 55 receptions. But I think Calvin Johnson opens it up not only for the passing game, because now you can't double Golden Tate, but it'll also open everything up for the running game. Reggie Bush should be coming back this week, right, Adam? And he's only rushed for 171 yards, and Joique Bell only has 313 yards rushing. Combined, the team only has 637 yards rushing, 3.1 yards per carry. I mean, you got to at least be able to run the ball, and I thought with Reggie Bush they'd be able to do that, but then again, Reggie has been hurt, Calvin Johnson's been hurt. It will be interesting to see what will happen now that those guys come back, and then they also get Eric Ebron back as well.
Yeah, well, the biggest concerns for this team going into the bye and now coming out of the bye are the lack of production at tight end, mostly due to injury, but also due to those guys not always getting it or not getting targets. It's been the offensive line and pass protection on Stafford. It's been the lack of explosion in the running game. Those have been probably the biggest and scariest factors for the Lions so far and the things that you would worry about the most. But I think the tight end thing could be fixed. The running thing may or may not be fixed. Who knows? But, yeah, those are things to keep an eye on and things that could unseat them. But I think they'll be okay. What I really am going to look for is to see how they do against Miami because, Miami's a very good team. I wasn't sure about them, but I'm sure about their defense. And, Andrew, you can speak more to that covering the AFC East. But, it's a team that I feel looks like they're able to overcome a lot of silliness from years past. And so even with the running game and tight end and pass protection woes. I'd say the scariest thing would probably be their pass protection woes, if I was going to say, anything. But I think that's going to be a good game, and so is Bears-Packers. Zach, I know you cover the NFC South. I'm curious. Saints-Niners is a very good game that I'm very intrigued about for both teams. And you covering the NFC South, you could speak to the Saints. And then what are your feelings on Atlanta-Tampa? I mean, and your feelings on Tampa overall and why that hasn't worked. I've said it before that I think it's because of Josh McCown, and you can't put your fortunes on him. But the defense hasn't been good. Maybe just your thoughts on Tampa, and then if you want to talk Saints-Niners a little bit.
Yeah, well, I cover AFC South, but I can touch on some.
I'm sorry, my apologies.
No, it's all good, but I can touch on some NFC South. I mean, I'll start with this Niners New Orleans game. I mean, these are two teams trending in opposite directions right now. You got New Orleans, who just started awful. Granted, 3 out of their first 4 were on the road, so that's obviously their bugaboo. And the Niners, it's kind of just been a mess all year with the whole Harbaugh situation. But honestly, and this might just be the homer in me talking, but I think the Niners are going to come out and, prove some people wrong this weekend. They have a tendency to come up big when people least expect it. And right now, I don't think anybody is picking the Niners to win this game. What are the Saints? They're 5.5-point favorites. And I think most people will probably take that spread at home with New Orleans. I think the Niners are going to come out and surprise some people. Their biggest deal right now is they need to find an identity, and they have no identity because they can't figure out whether they want to be a passing team or a running team. So the second they figure that out and Roman decides to just give the ball to Frank Gore basically every time, I think they'll be okay, and I think they will figure that out, but it might take some time. As far as the Saints are concerned, the Saints at home are the Saints. Like, it is what it is. They're a great team. And they're they're almost unbeatable at the Superdome. I will say last year, the Niners, for some reason, make this annual trip to New Orleans based on schedules. Last year, they would have beat them if not for a bad call on a Patrick Willis fumble. And I think the year before they did beat them. So, I don't think the Niners are intimidated at all. By the Superdome or any of that stuff.
No, I agree with you on that, Zach. I remember that game. It was like a roughing the passer call that really.
Yeah, that's what it was. The roughing the passer, and then it cost them the game.
Roughing the passer. Yeah, I was impressed with San Francisco in that game. They should have won that game last year. You're right about that. That was And
then Tampa Bay, man, Tampa Bay has firepower, and like you look at the team, and it's like they have some weapons, especially on offense. They have Vincent Jackson, who, should just be a freak with the way he's built. And they have Bobby Rainey, but I think you touched on it. Their quarterback situation is just a mess over there. Their coaching's a mess. And every year, you think they're going to be okay, and they never are.
Well, Zach, my apologies. I'm sorry I made you talk about Tampa Bay. Any quick thoughts about your division really quick? Because I wanted to actually ask Andrew something about his, but first I wanted to see give me some quick topics about your division, like things to look for.
All right, well, there's a couple of teams on buys this week. Indianapolis and Houston both on buys. The big story coming out today was Indianapolis. Pat Hamilton, the offensive coordinator for the Colts, apparently is getting linked to a bunch of head coaching jobs. The Niners being one, and I want to say, I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was the Giants even.
Wow.
There's another big team, though, so, he's getting linked to a few things. As far as the Colts, they're going to run away at that division.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, that's no brand. Their offense, and Andrew Luck's in the discussion with Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning. He's there. He's in the elite list. The Texans, a lot of disappointment starting with their first pick in Clowney, who missed the game last week because of an illness. No one really knows exactly what went wrong there. His knee's still sore, potentially not getting along with O'Brien. They're making a quarterback change, so, they got a week to figure it out. They're on a bye, so I don't know. Mallet might be the answer, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that.
Is the team kind of rallying behind Mallet? I mean, Andre Johnson, there were reports surfacing that he didn't go up to ownership and say, hey, I want Ryan Mallett as my quarterback, but there were reports surfacing that he was pushing Ryan Mallett. He really liked him on the offense in terms of his arm strength and being able to throw the ball. I mean, do you really think Andre Johnson was just like, yo, I need the ball. I'm on my last legs in my career. Get this guy in. He's going to give us the best chance to win, and that's why they went with the change? Or do you think it was just like, hey, look, Ryan Fitzpatrick is not getting it done, which he really wasn't. And everyone knew that. He was just there to, stabilize the ship, but he hasn't, I guess, even done that. And here we are. We have Ryan Mallett, and they do have threats everywhere. Aaron Foster has had a resurgent year this year. DeAndre Hopkins has looked great in his second year, and then Andre Johnson is a future Hall of Famer, but he hasn't done too well.
I think it's a combo. I mean, listen, Andre Johnson is not a happy camper right now. He said, they asked him where he was going for the bye week, and he's like, I want to go off to an island somewhere and, never appear far, far away. So he's pissed off, and it would not surprise me. He does have the type of personality to go to ownership. And he likes the fact, you touched on this, Mallett can sling the ball downfield. And that's worth a lot because he can actually get the ball down there. And Fitzpatrick's more of a dink and dub, kind of guy. But I will say since they've officially made the change, since they announced the quarterback change, he said all the right things. Andre Johnson, he says, I support both quarterbacks. I don't care. So anything he's saying to the media has been the right things. And, I mean, on that token, he should say that because, Mallett's probably not your answer at franchise quarterback, and they could just as easily switch back to Fitzpatrick. And you don't want to pitch Fitzpatrick off and not get the ball any more than you're already not right now. So he's doing all the right things within the media. I know behind closed doors he might be, losing it, but he's saying good things about both quarterbacks. And I do think it was time for a change because they're not going to get anywhere. But it is just a shame that they have the best defensive player, on the planet. And he's just such a beast, Watt, and the offense is just so stagnant and can't do anything to help them. Before
I ask Andrew, before I get Andrew's take on the AFC East, just one quick thing about your division. Last team, Titans. I want to know, when are they going to figure out the quarterback situation there? And do you think Mettenberger is going to be the guy, or is Ken Whisenhunt going to lose his job? What's the deal with that team?
I mean, Whisenhunt might for sure lose his job. They're going to go with Mettenberger these last 8 games and hope. Mettenberger, I think he was drafted in the 6th round, maybe 7th out of LSU. He's a higher draft pick than that. He was injured, had the drug problems, arrest, whatever. He has, he has an attitude. But they're going to go with that, and they're going to hope he's the answer at quarterback. But I've already been reading reports and sending out articles in my newsletters that they're looking at Jameis Winston.
Oh.
And so they figure they're not going to get Mariota from Oregon, and they're going to have second quarterback available type pick, and they're like, it sounds to me like they want to go for that, and they keep touching on that. So I'm not even sure they want Mettenberger to succeed over there, because then it gives them an excuse. If Mettenberger fails, these last 8 games, it's like, okay, this guy's not the guy. It was a 6th-round pick, whatever. It gives them a built-in excuse, like, hey, we need a quarterback, and go for it. So just don't be surprised if they do something crazy and take Winston in the 1st round as the second quarterback selected.
Have they not realized that he has a litany of off-the-field problems, and there was just a report by TMZ that Jameis Winston might have been involved in a point-shaving scandal this past game against Louisville, where his buddy, Mr. Rob or something, R-A-B-B, he used to play with Florida State, one of his buddies, he intentionally threw the first half of the Louisville game so that his buddy could win money, and then he would lead the charge. And now, granted, Florida State hasn't started well in most of their games in the first half, but I mean, this is just too much. I mean, there's a lot of smoke. This is like a chimney. This isn't even like where there's smoke, there's fire. This is like, I don't even know how to describe it, like a forest fire over there at FSU.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I wouldn't touch that guy with a 10-foot pole. It's just disaster waiting to happen. I mean, there was there's bad things about guys, certain times coming out of the draft. This is just like, it constantly gets worse for him, from like stealing the crab legs to the rape case to this. It's just a mess. And like, listen, I wouldn't touch the guy, but he is talented, and like, he could bring people into the seats. So just don't be surprised if that happens.
He's polarizing too, and I think that's important because, the Titans, maybe the ownership's looking for a polarizing guy, a guy to put the Titans on the map nationally, even if it's a guy who's a hot mess, because, I don't know. I mean, the Titans are a very nondescript team. Maybe
exactly
will be both the best and the worst thing that could happen to them.
Yeah, well, I don't think they want a rape case and point scandals as their polarization. It's different when you have the Jets and you're just very, very bad as polarizing. But I just don't know. If I were them, I mean, granted, I'm not a football expert here. No one's asking for my scout's opinion, but I'm gonna give it anyway. And I'm gonna say that if they do pick Jameis, it's gonna be a big mistake, and they should pick someone else to help out the rest of that team. Maybe a cornerback, maybe a linebacker in the first round, and then just take a Connor Cook, a Sean Mannion out of Oregon State as their second or third round guy. I know it's very hard to get second or third round guys, but I'd rather invest my franchise in that than go for Jameis Winston and get everything that comes with that. I mean, there's too much bad publicity around him for there not to be something to be worried about once he turns pro.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, but Andrew, the AFC East, has it surprised you? Because it surprised me that the Bills and the Dolphins have been not just good, but very competitive, and both these teams are physical and play good defense, and New England all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Brady in New England looked like the offense and the Brady we all know and love after Week 4. We were killing them after that Week 4 loss to the Chiefs, and all of a sudden they've exploded onto the scene, and that AFC East all of a sudden outside of the Jets looks really, really good.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I know it's not going to shock everybody, but when you have a good quarterback, you're going to win games. I mean, breaking news here, but Miami is 5-3, Buffalo is 5-3. They're both a game back in the division. If both win this weekend, they'll be one game officially in the loss column, tied for second behind New England. Both teams still play New England once more. Look, New England, you and I didn't really say they were done, per se. We did raise big questions about their offensive line and the fact that some of the targets didn't look good, and their defense, which was supposed to be really, really good this year, didn't look as good, let's say. But Brady's played as well as anyone. He's probably the MVP of the league, unfortunately. It's just nauseating sometimes, but he's so good. And it shouldn't really surprise anyone. They're at the top of the division. Buffalo, they basically did what the Jets didn't want to do. They named Kyle Orton their starter. They gave up on E.J. Manuel. They turned around their season. They've won the last 2 games, 3 of the last 4 as well. They got the whole momentum with the Pagula. The Pagulas buying the Bills, which has been great for Buffalo. They have a great fan base there. Miami, Ryan Tannehill, after getting called out by Joe Philbin, they've won 3 straight games, which started against the Oakland Raiders in London, and their offense has been incredible. Bill Lazor, some people might say, leave for a head coaching job somewhere. Where it is, I don't really know. It's very speculative. But they said, I think if Joe Philbin doesn't do well this year, maybe they go with Bill Lazor. But Ryan Tannehill, they've started to use him as an athletic quarterback. And what I mean by that is they aren't designing runs, specified runs for him, but they're moving the pocket for him and using his athleticism. Because let's not forget, at Texas A&M, he played wide receiver there. So the guy can really play, and he's really athletic, and he moved to quarterback his senior year where he was very good for them. They drafted him. They started moving him out of the pocket, stopped keeping him in the pocket, and that's what's changed everything because he has broken off big runs. He's shown he's kind of bluffed the ability to run if presented with that opportunity, and that's, as we all know when we watch Russell Wilson, Colin Kaepernick, that's what is really dangerous. And the thing about Miami and Buffalo is both those teams have incredible front fours. Olivier Vernon, Cameron Wake, who's one of the best pass rushers in the league, really star in that Miami defensive line. And that, in turn, has made the fact that Brent Grimes, who was a Pro Bowler last year at cornerback, has had a hot streak over the last 2 games. 3 interceptions, including 2 last week against the Chargers. And Louis Delmas, who came from Detroit, Adam, like you know, he had a lot of injury concerns, but he's finally healthy. He's playing really well. And then in Buffalo, a lot of people thought that losing Jairus Byrd to New Orleans would be a huge problem, but it actually hasn't been. Stephon Gilmore has played okay. He's been, solid at the very least. And then that front line, look, Marcel Darius, you can say what you want about his off-the-field problems before the season, but he has been an absolute stud on the field. I think he's 5th in the league with 6.5 sacks for a defensive tackle. 6.5 for a defensive tackle. Most defensive tackles don't really get sacks in this day and age more than, I'd say, 5 or 6, and he has 6.5 through half a year. He's played well. Mario Williams is great. Jerry Hughes has been resurgent in his career. But the only thing about Buffalo going into KC this weekend that bothers me is that they don't have Fred Jackson. The running game was terrible before the bye. They had like 30-something yards with Anthony Dixon and Bryce Brown rushing the ball. And Sammy Watkins is also banged up. Both those guys are now questionable. So can they eventually contend for New England? I mean, this is what I said to you, Adam, back in Week 4. Until New England is not at the top of the division standings after Week 16, you give it to New England by default. And then I think Miami and Buffalo just battle it out for the 5 or 6 seed in the wild card.
Yeah, I think that actually next week, I mean, the Bills could lose to Kansas City because Kansas City, I think, is going to your division. That Kansas City is miles better than that Week 1 loss to the Titans. They've been a much better team than that since.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the Bills could lose to Kansas City. The Dolphins could lose to Detroit. We previewed that game earlier. But I think next week when Miami and the Bills face off on Thursday Night Football, that'll be really, really big to decide who can be that second team to try, because both teams, as you said, have a game against New England. Who can be in second place by the time one of them goes against New England, trying to either unseat them or get that much closer to a wild card berth?
Yeah, I mean, Miami has 2 games against the Jets, which will help, and that 1 game against New England sandwiched in between, and then the Bills end the year at New England, which will be tough, and then 1 more game against the Jets. But they do have a tough remaining schedule, the Bills do. Denver, Green Bay, Oakland, and Cleveland. So that's all winning teams right now. And then Miami, they have Baltimore, Minnesota, Denver, and then the 2 games against the Jets and New England. I mean, Zach, what do you like? I mean, obviously I cover this division, but when you look at the division from an outsider perspective, I mean, what do you see? What questions do you raise?
I mean, I see some good teams. I am so impressed with Miami. If they didn't blow that game against Green Bay at home, they'd be sitting there only 1 game back of New England right now. So I'm very impressed with both these teams. I agree with, I think Adam said it, I think that Thursday night game, both coming off the short week next Thursday, is going to be huge. And, I'm so impressed with Tannehill, the way they have him moving, the way their offense is flowing. I think the Bills, what I'm worried about, and maybe you could, answer this for me, their running game, I know you touched on this, their running game is a problem right now with those 2 guys down. And, Boobie Dixon just doesn't seem like the answer. And I know they got the rookie also. Are they going to start playing him more? Who are they giving the touches to over there?
Yeah, well, last week they started Anthony Dixon. They kind of gave him the lion's share of the carries, and they tried going with Bryce Brown, who they acquired in the offseason for a draft pick. I mean, they really didn't play well, though. That running game was a focus during the bye week for the coaching staff. Doug Marrone talked about it. I sent out stories in the newsletter about it. So that'll be the biggest thing, especially with Kyle Orton, who's not going to, quote-unquote, win you games, but he's not going to lose you games either. He's that steady veteran presence. And, seen that in their turnaround. So, I mean, that is the biggest key, and they did not do well against the Jets before that. I mean, they were not able to really move the ball up and down the field. If you think about it, Kyle Orton didn't complete a lot of passes that game. I think he only completed like 12. But he had big plays to Sammy Watkins in the passing game, and then they also got lucky with the fact that Geno Smith thought that the Jets were the colors were white and blue, and he threw 3 interceptions, the same amount of incompletions he had. So, I mean, it will be very interesting to see those games this weekend. Before we get to the Cowboys like we wanted to, there was breaking news when we started the show that Carson Palmer actually signed a huge extension to stay with the Arizona Cardinals. The exact figures, hold on one second, is 3 years, $50 million.
How much guarantee? That's a lot of money for someone of that age.
Yeah, it really is. Especially a guy who's not mobile in a division with good D lines. I mean, the NFC West, between the Rams, I know they've taken a while to get it going, but between the Rams, Niners, Seahawks, and even those Cardinals, that division's all about D lines. I would think you'd want to put money in a younger, more mobile guy.
Yeah, and they were also 2-0 without Palmer to start the year, so you know they can win without him. They got good defense and stuff. I don't know. It seems like a lot of money to me, but they have it.
Yeah, but here's the argument that you're going to use for every middle line quarterback. We saw this with Andy Dalton. We saw this with Joe Flacco after the Super Bowl. We saw this with Jay Cutler. Who else is out there that they could have? They have Logan Thomas backing up Carson Palmer. And outside of the fact that Logan Thomas had one really nice throw against the Broncos where he threaded the needle to Andre Ellington, who ran 80 yards the rest of the way, I think that was his only completed pass in that game.
Yeah.
He's got physical tools, but I don't know if he's that great, especially if you saw him at Virginia Tech. And then Carson Palmer, who else are you going to get? I mean, they have not had a quarterback since Kurt Warner. They finally do, and they're one of the best teams in the league.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just worried about his, stability of staying healthy. Other than that, like you said, if you think about it, there really is no one else. There's not like quarterback just floating out there that people can, scoop up on.
Right.
But just a lot of money. It'd be interesting to see the guaranteed money numbers. But if he stays healthy, I guess it's not that bad. 3 years.
Yeah, and right. 3 years. I would have think that a 2 year, even if the guaranteed money was big, if it was big enough that it wasn't a cap hit and it was maybe 2 years, I think I'd be more okay with it. I just still contend that in the NFC West, in the AFC North, and it's starting to be in the AFC East, at least with the Dolphins and the Bills, that those divisions with the D lines that are present, I would just want like a guy who's a little younger, more mobile, like I had said before. But Carson's the best you're going to have right now, and he's better than nothing, and he's pretty good. So I guess I can understand it.
Yeah. So we go from one quarterback who got a big extension now to one who got one over the offseason and basically cap crippled the Cowboys this offseason in one Tony Romo. I don't know if you've heard, but he was injured. He injured his back against the Washington Redskins, came back into that same game on Monday Night Football, and re-injured his back. They didn't start him last week. They ended up losing when they had Brandon Weeden against the Cardinals. And granted, the Cardinals are a very good team, very good defense, who have somehow withstood the storm of injuries that have hit their team and suspensions in the name of Darryl Washington. But this week they flew to London. They brought Tony Romo there, bad back and all, and he's been practicing all week. And we can kind of preview this game and talk about the Cowboys, but they're going to take on Jacksonville. All signs point to the fact that Tony Romo is going to play. Guys, should Tony Romo be starting in this game?
Go for it.
No. I think, look, I still think the Cowboys probably could have lost that game to Arizona, maybe not as badly because Brandon Weeden is terrible. But you know what? Jacksonville, Blake Bortles turns the ball over a lot. I know you're intimately familiar with that, Zach, that being your division, but Bortles turns the ball over a lot. That's a team that I think that the Cowboys can just kind of out-talent and be better than. And, just don't take Romo to London when he's coming off a bad back. Leave him in Texas. You've got to bye after that. You got 2 weeks to get him healthy, and then start coming back for games late down the stretch that include 2 games against the Eagles and another game against the Giants. And, be a little smarter with him. I kind of had a wait-and-see attitude with these Cowboys and thinking that I've seen this movie before with them getting off to a hot start. And I just worry, especially with this Romo thing, is this going to be the beginning of their slide? Are they going to slide back to 8-8 like we thought they might be? Because I'm worried about it, and especially trying to start Romo in London against Jacksonville, who, like I said, you should be able to beat even with Brandon Weeden. I don't like it at all.
I agree with you, Adam. I was going to say the same thing. Listen, I think everyone can agree Brandon Weeden is awful. He is just an awful quarterback, and we saw that last week. But Jacksonville, it's Jacksonville. There's no reason they can't go in there with the backup quarterback, hand the ball off to Murray 30 times, and come out with a victory. You already touched on this. He's going to throw 2 to 3 interceptions, Bortles. He does. He has the last couple of games, and he'll continue to do it. He's a rookie, and that's what it is. They can go in there and beat them. They should be resting Romo. They got the bye next week, so that gives them another week of rest, which should be 3 weeks of rest, heading into a big game at New York against the Giants. So, yeah, I don't see any reason why he should be playing. I don't think he should have flew to London. I know, Jerry Jones saying I'll give up my wife's first-class seat and he can be comfortable on the trip. I don't get it at all. I think you should just trust your defense. You got the best running back in the league, and go win the game. Imagine this scenario. Imagine he takes a hit and he's out for the year because of one hit this game. Can you imagine the backlash that's going to come with that? And then you're stuck with Brandon Weeden for the last 6 games of the year. It's going to be a disaster. I don't even want to know what Jerry Jones is going to have to go through if that happens. So, personally, I'm saying, obviously I think he's healthy enough and, he can play. And I'm not a doctor, so I don't know how bad his back is. But I did hear he has 2 fractures in it or whatever. So, it's not good. And the guy's obviously fragile. He's coming off back surgery. One bad hit's going to get him at any time. I think you take this opportunity. You're facing the worst team in the league. You give him 1 extra week of rest and then the bye, and then you suit him up for down the stretch.
Yeah, because like you said, coming back at the Giants and like I had said, 2 against the Eagles. Not 1, but 2, because they haven't even played the Eagles the first time. So you got big divisional games coming on down the stretch. And like we've mentioned, Jacksonville, they're a poor team, a lot of turnovers to buy. It's just a bad idea to me because, if they're already continuing, if they're on a slide, you can at least correct it better with a healthy Romo than with a Brandon Weeden. But, Andrew, what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, I mean, they could have corrected this by not putting him back in against Washington. I know it was Monday Night Football, and I know you're losing, but Brandon Weeden was doing okay in relief. He probably could have at least won the game or tied the game or done whatever, and even if they lost, whatever, you look at the long term and you say, okay, we're going to rest Tony Romo and play him next week when he's fully healthy. I've had a back injury before. I haven't had surgery, but I thought about having it because I had a hernia, and I can tell you that sitting on an airplane, granted this is coach and not freaking first class, but once you're sitting down for a while and you have a back injury, really, really hurts, and it really stiffens you up like crazy. You're very uncomfortable. Now, with that said, he has, first-class training, first-class doctors, first-class travel. You don't really – I have to agree with Zach and you, Adam, and you say you don't start him at all because I think you can win by just running the ball down Jacksonville's throat. Their defense isn't that great. You still have Des Bryant on the outside who can throw to, who will beat any of Jacksonville's corners. Their defense, in terms of injuries, is hurt a lot as well. Paul Posluszny has missed most of the season and will miss the rest of the season due to an injury. Their backup to him is injured, and he's missing the game. Their starting corners are hurt, and Blake Bortles is a turnover waiting to happen in his rookie year. Now, granted, the Cowboys are missing Justin Durant, which is a huge part of their defense. But look, I think you can survive. Look, you don't need style points at this time of the year. You just need to win. And if they win 20-17, oh well, they're 7-2. No one's going to care. And if you don't play Romo, you're now 7-2 with him fully healthy on 2.5 weeks of rest. I would not have flown him out there. That was not smart. But if they really, really feel like playing him, then they're going to play him. And if they win, then I guess it's a moot point. But if he gets hurt, like you guys have said, then it's going to be an absolute you-know-what show. And, Jerry Jones is going to look like a fool again.
Oh, he's going to look like a big fool. And, kiss it goodbye. I had low expectations for this Cowboys team. I had said it before that I thought they were going to be, 3-13. I thought they were going to be one of the worst teams in the league because Romo coming off the back injury and he's in his early 30s. Not two very bad combinations in a sport like football because I didn't trust that defense for a lot of reasons. Now, they have 6 wins. They had a good win against Seattle. Yada, yada. We know what they are at this point. But they're going to be a 6-10 team if Romo gets hurt against Jacksonville, or a 7-9 team, because if Romo gets hurt against Jacksonville and they still win that game, guarantee you when they come back with Brandon Weeden at the helm for the rest of the year, they ain't winning the rest of those games. And Jerry Jones is going to look like an absolute fool.
Yeah, they got no gimmies. Looking at their schedule, they got no gimmies after this game coming up. Giants, Eagles, Bears in Chicago, Eagles again, Colts. It's a tough road for them down the stretch. So I hope for their sake he stays healthy. It's gonna be a disaster.
And then you finish with the Washington team that's not only a division rival, but they'd already beat you. So
right, it's gonna be tough for them. So if they want any chance, Romo better be healthy, which is why I'm sitting him against the one gimme game you have right now.
Right, and he shouldn't even be going to London because, Andrew, you touched on it, man. You shouldn't be sitting on a plane, and this isn't a plane from where you live on the East Coast. This is now it's not as far as where we live here in California where you got to cross the country, but this is still from Texas. So this is still the 1,500 miles to get to the Atlantic, and then the 3,000 miles across the Atlantic, whatever it is. It's that's a long time for this guy to be sitting like that on his back with the time change. Why did you even bring him? You should have stayed home in Texas. I don't get it at all.
I would say it's like a 8-9 hour flight, I would say.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. So, that's it from us. I don't know if you guys want to preview any games. We kind of really previewed all of them when we looked at each one. Do you guys want to do a little midseason MVP real quick? Just name a guy, midseason MVP, Coach of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, or kind of just end it?
Go ahead, Zach.
I'd go Tom Brady. It's every year with them, and you could go Tom Brady, you could go Peyton Manning. It's always one of these two up in the air. But you look at Brady's weapons that he has. He has Gronkowski, but the receivers, Edelman, he's just unbelievable. The way he pinpoints that ball in every game, he's throwing for 400 yards, 4 or 5 touchdowns. They're 7-2. Midseason MVP, I'm giving it to Tom Brady right now.
Tom Brady's a good one. My midseason MVP, I'm going to give it to Luck, your division, AFC South. I think that team's getting better around him, but Luck, I like what Luck's doing. I think he's maturing as a quarterback. I think he's putting up good numbers. It'd either be Luck or it'd be Aaron Rodgers, who's quietly having a really elite season. It might be the only good thing about that team.
Yeah, if I had to pick, all right, this is the question I pose to you, and it's always posed every year. Is the MVP award who the best player is or who is actually important to their team? Because if you're going to say it's who the best player is, then Tom Brady or Peyton Manning gets it this year. But if it's really who's really important to their team, I would say it's Tom Brady or maybe even Big Ben. Because if you replace Tom Brady in that team, I think the Patriots are still winning that division. They're like a 9-7, 10-6 team. As we saw what happened when he got lost to an ACL injury, and then they won 11 games with Matt Castle. You do the same with Luck or Roethlisberger, especially Luck, when they didn't have Peyton Manning and they had that 1 year with what's his name, Curtis Painter at quarterback. They were 2-14. They get Andrew Luck the next year. They're 11-5. They make the playoffs, or 10-6. They make the playoffs the next year, win the division 11-5, 12-4, and this year they're 5-3, right, Zach?
Who are you talking about?
Wolves.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're 5-3. Without him, given the lack of talent on that defense, which is built to play with a lead, that team would probably be 4-12, 5-11. So, in my opinion, it goes to Andrew Luck or Big Ben, based on their seasons. But that's just because I'm going purely by, if you take that guy off the team, how much worse would they be? And I've seen how much worse the Patriots are without Tom Brady, and it's not a lot. Or it's not as much as you think.
And you're not going to go wrong with any of those guys we just picked.
Right.
They're all MVP caliber seasons right now.
Yeah, exactly. Do you guys have a specific Rookie of the Year or Coach of the Year? I mean, is Coach of the Year a two-headed race between now Mike Pettin and Bruce Arians, or does Jason Garrett get a nod? Or maybe even Joe Philbin sneaking in there right now? Or even Joe Philbin?
Philbin, I think, Philbin, like you mentioned, Pettin, Bruce Arians, definitely. I mean, you could even throw in Jim Caldwell in there. I mean, I don't know why people never throw him in there, but yeah, you could throw in Jim Caldwell. Maybe even maybe not Belichick. I was gonna say, but we kind of I would just say those guys, those three, and then maybe even a Caldwell, like I mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I go Bruce Arians, just the job he's done in that division. Such a tough division, and I keep waiting for them to fade, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I'm just like, every week, they've got off to these starts before where they've started 4-0 and then finished the year 4-12 and like ridiculous things, but I just don't see this team fading this year. So, and no one expected them. They ever knew they were a good team, the Cardinals, but I don't think anybody thought they were going to finish better than third in the division. So,
yeah. I think those are the candidates, and I think we'll end it from here. I mean, good first show. We'll have Michael Green, who I forget what he covers. I think he does the
NFC South, I believe. Which
is South team. So hopefully next week we'll have 4, and we'll be back at full strength, and we'll do this again.
All right, guys.
All right, cool. Yeah. So thank you for everyone who viewed, and I mean everyone by one person. And hopefully you guys will watch this. So you can tweet at us at AGBerg12, at Blue Collar God, and at Zachary Benau, Benau. Thanks for watching, guys, and join us next week sometime when we arbitrarily decide on a time and announce it via Facebook and Twitter.